Good morning, everybody, and very welcome also from my side. I will be moderating the panel discussion, We Want More Diversity and Visibility, and I'm very happy to welcome now the guests on the stage. Please come here. I don't need any, you can sit. The only thing I need is a table. So, wait, we have to organize. Before we start with the discussion, I would like to say some words in advance. My name is Aurora Rodonò, and as you can tell from my name, I'm also so-called person with a migrant background, like they call us, a post-migrant person who grew up here in Germany. My parents came from Sicily here, and so I'm pretty much involved not only by work but also with my biography in this theme, and I'm happy to discuss today the diversity issues, the issues on race, gender, age, class, disability, and sexual orientation today with you and with all of you. The guests who are here today have been working for so many years and have been struggling for visibility and equality of different unrepresented and marginalized groups for years. And for sure the struggle that I share too is not only a struggle on images and representation, but it is a political struggle, I would say, that aims to shift the hegemonic relation within our society, the power relation. Silke, you said it, Simon, you said it also, so aesthetics and politics are not separated. And still, even if there is so much knowledge and everybody has been working and struggling for so many years and there's so many initiatives, our society is still dominated by the privileged, white, male, patriarchal, and heterosexual groups who in many cases have the institutional power to decide what becomes visible and what does not. So we're talking about institutional racism, institutional discrimination, and it is needless to say that politics and aesthetics are not two separate spheres, but the way we speak and define and describe our world within the arts, within film, the way we represent the world through images and sounds, and furthermore, the way we work, the way we produce, and the relation we make within the working process is politics. So the questions we are trying to discuss today are, what kind of system is it? What are we talking about exactly? And how to dismantle this system which is still structured racially. One little example, I mean, it's not very hard to understand that our society is still racially structured. We are here in the street, I don't want to say even the name. So Berlin post-colonial and so many activists involved in the struggle against racism have been fighting to change the name of the street, and it's still this name. So we can see that our memory, our language, our images and are still not being decolonized. So it's also about decolonizing our own minds. And I think this is also a very ambivalent situation, because I'm asking myself, we are all living within this system, we are struggling against discrimination, but how can we, let's say, decolonize ourselves? Because it's really hard and difficult. And like there's one book, maybe you might know, by Johanna Schaffer, The Ambivalence of the Visibility, who is saying more visibility doesn't necessarily mean more political power, because I mean, we can have another gaze, we can build up solidarity and we can build up collaborations, but we have to deal with the institutions that are still structured as they are. So this is a really complex and very difficult situation. So maybe we can try to speak about our practices and to find out how to empower ourselves and how to build collaborations. What I find also very important is what you pointed out, Simon, it's the intersectional perspective and approach, which I think is important to everybody, because like I know your work, so everybody is dealing with these issues, because you cannot speak about race without speaking about class, about gender, about age and disability. So this comes together. But before we get into the discussion, I would like to... Dankeschön, thank you. I would like to introduce the guests. And I start with Christopher, who's sitting next to me. Christopher Racster is Executive Director of Outfest, UCLA Legacy Project in the USA. He's a trusted voice in the LGBTI community for more than 20 years. You are involved in the Outfest UCLA Legacy Project, which is an amazing project, I find. I was on the website and there are like 37 items. So for years you have been collecting images from the LGBTI scene. You are not only collecting and making programs, you're restoring films, so you're making visible the legacy of these communities that are heterogeneous. It's not a homogeneous community for sure, and make it accessible for other people to see these films and to know about it. So very welcome. We're happy that you came here from Los Angeles. This is cool. A warm welcome to Christopher. Next to Christopher, there's Sheri Hagen. She's a director, she's an actress, and she is part of the group Black Filmmakers Community. And Sheri was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and grew up in Hamburg, where she trained at the Stage School of Dance. And she has been involved in numerous films and theater projects, so between film and theater. And she made this awarded beautiful film, At Second Glance, auf den zweiten Blick, which I found very, very beautiful and interesting, because your cast is people are disabled, so-called disabled, are black, but you do it with naturally. So this is really a good example for a turn upside down of a gaze, because it's not the classical stereotype narration and representation where people are marked, but it's a perspective from a black artist. So, and you are also involved in this collective, which is exactly there to dismantle stereotypes and to help each other. So maybe you can tell later a little bit how you exactly do that and what your aims are. Very welcome to Sheri. Next to Sheri, there's Karola. Karola is a film curator, and she is a founder of the Kinothek Asta Nielsen. Karola is a film critic, a researcher, a curator. She's doing so many things, and in the 80s, from 1985 until 1989, she was the director of the short film festival Oberhausen. Then in 1999, a group of theorists, of filmmakers, of researchers were founding, of all genders, right? Not only women, were founding the Kinothek to focus on women's representation on films by women. So very welcome, Karola. Next to Karola, there's Emily Morgan. Emily Morgan is a London-based producer, and she has been also involved in different projects in many countries. So you're not only working in London, but you have been in Brazil, you have been in Latin America. So, and diversity is also one of your topics. You just won the BAFTA Prize for this beautiful film, I Am Not a Witch, by Rungana Nyoni. So congratulations, first of all. So as a producer, you have also a lot of power on images. You can decide, and diversity is an important issue for you. So thank you for being here from London. And and then there's Simone. We just heard your talk and your statement. Simone is an artist and performer between film, theater, and performance based here in Berlin. And like we were hearing from your talk, you're focusing on gender issues, on queerness, on post-migration issues, and also on post-colonial issues. You were quoting Frantz Fanon, which I think is very important, because it tells a lot about how this othering works. So if people are considered as disabled, as elder, as whatever, it's not because they are like this, but because others make them like this. So it's about constructing the other, and I think this example of Frantz Fanon is or this book of Frantz Fanon is telling a lot about it. And the interesting thing is that you are very much working within the theater scene, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this later. So what is working differently? It seems that there are very nice and very progressive initiatives within the theater scene, which maybe are lacking in the film scene, ? So we're very welcome to you, Simone. So before I go into specific questions to your work, I would like to ask you in the first round to speak about your own practices related to this topic. Like I was saying, you have been working within this issue for so many years, and not everybody knows your practices, your work. So I would like to ask you, each of you, to give a little insight into your work and what you have been struggling for, how you have been building up these structures. Is it something that comes from below? How is the relation with the institutions? I think we can learn a lot, since we, for example, do not have this sort of diversity standards you have in the UK, or we don't have such a huge archive here in Europe or in Germany for the LGBTI scene, etc., etc. It would be very interesting to know about your work. Can I have one of the mics for Christopher, please? Christopher, would you please give us an insight?
Is it on? Yeah. Thank you. I'm very privileged to be amongst this group. We were talking before, and it's an impressive group of people. I started as a filmmaker. Queer imagery was not something I saw when I was younger. I didn't have something to identify with. So I started by telling queer stories. It was very important to me to be seen, to be heard, and they reveal something that sparks a dialogue, no matter who the other is that is being shown in imagery. I had the great good fortune of being shown at Outfest, which is the organization I now run. We are a series of film festivals, education programs, and the archive, which we are very proud now has 37,000 works in it. We work on several levels: exhibition, visibility. We all need to be seen, and the LGBTQI community is not a monolith. We are several communities. It is a community of communities, and we do not necessarily understand one another. So a festival that is inclusive of all of those and creates a space for belonging for all of those helps dismantle that first within our own community. Our education and mentoring programs are there to help inspire, but our activist role is really to take a look at Hollywood and both influence and acquire. Our job is to influence those decision makers however we can, at whatever level, to make sure that they are seeing us and perhaps making different decisions. We are also working to acquire a space where we become those decision makers. Again, not easy. This is a long-term fight, but those are our two main areas of work that over time we hope will help dismantle the hegemony, quite frankly, of people who look like me. Even within the queer sphere, I have privilege because I am a gay male and white. So it is also a system of me relearning and me understanding and me changing. So we work on all those levels.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Sheri Hagen. I started as an actress and working as an actress in the German film industry. And being an actress, I mostly worked in roles, or mostly played roles, which are always unable to stand for themselves and to speak for themselves, which means all the roles I had mostly was dependent on white characters, lead characters, guiding me, educating me, and telling me how to live or how to survive. And so being sick of these images, which means that mostly black characters, especially in German television and on screen, stands for poverty, catastrophe, for illness and AIDS. So, all hustlers and criminals. So after seeing these images, I started to speak up, and I wanted to have my own films because I'm also a mother. I'm a female mother, black mother, which means my children and the generation of my children, they do have no heroes and no role models. All the role models and heroes are white. And so for that, I started to write my own stories, and all my films, short films and feature films, they never received funding. I tried many fundings and they never received funding. So a story from and with a black perspective hasn't got a chance in Germany, not yet. So we're working on that. So which means I wasn't the only one. So I'm a part of a black filmmaker group in Germany, because it's not only me I'm speaking of, because there are much more. And some of them are here in the public, which I'm really happy. So we formed this group. We're currently now on Facebook, but we're already thinking of starting an association to reach out more and larger. And because we formed this group, because we work on screen, we work behind scenes, and we work in the audience. We exist in German reality, but we do not exist in the German stories or in the German films. So we demand stories from and with a black perspective. And we want the diversity of German society to be reflected in staff, program, and in the audience. And so we want to be visible. We want us to be seen and heard. We want our stories to be seen and heard. And that's why we've got this black filmmaker group.
Thank you very much, Sheri.
I'm a programmer of film, and as has been said before, in 1999, nearly 20 years ago now, together with a group of other people, we founded an association called Kinothek Asta Nielsen. It was not easy to find a name for our project. So we decided on Asta Nielsen because we felt that this great star, director and film worker at the beginning of the history of cinema incorporated very much the possibilities that cinema holds in store for female protagonists and women, and which on the other side so many times is denied to them. The name Kinothek makes a point because we are a living archive. We are interested on bringing films to an audience and working in close collaboration with the audience. One aspect of our work is that we are interested in the history of women's cinema, because women in cinema, before the camera, behind the camera, their contribution has always been marginalized and still is in a way, even though progress has been made. So we are interested in the history because we feel, and this has been said before, and one of the panels that has been organized by the festival here was dedicated to that subject. We will not understand the present as long as we do not understand the history. This is a central aspect of our work, which also has to do with visibility. And our main objective is to bring this aspect of history into the presence of cinema, to show that films from 1910 have a meaning today and we can understand them, and it's not to unveil, part of a history and say this has been done before, but to show the importance of a film from the 1910s, from the 20s or the 70s, in order to make clear that they have an importance for us today. We've done big film historic retrospectives. The first international Germaine du Lac retrospective, we showed Alice Guy, Asta Nielsen. We even instigated restorations of films, which is also very important. And we had another great discovery last year. We did a retrospective of the work of the Neapolitan filmmaker Elvira Notari from the silent area. And that's one part of the work, and I'd like to leave it with this.
Thank you, Karola.
One more thing, I would like to say that my colleagues who've been sharing this work for a long time are here in this audience. It's Heide Schlüppmann and Gabi Babic.
Hi, yeah, it's really amazing to be here in this part of this forum and with this group of people. And as Aurora said, I'm a producer, an emerging producer really based in the UK. And I guess I'll focus on I'm Not a Witch, the film I just made, which was my first feature. And it had been developed actually with a sort of initiated by a French producer with Rongana Nyoni, who's a Welsh-Zambian director, but who has been based in the UK. And most of the funding ended up coming from the UK in the end. And I think that really is because of the enthusiasm for her as a director and her as a fresh voice, a diverse voice. And so the main funder was the British Film Institute, who have at the core of their funding the diversity standards. And I think we're the first film ever to meet all four, and I think any film they fund has to meet two of these standards. So one is about on-screen representation, the next is about the leadership of the project, the other one is about whether the film is an entry into the film industry for a number of people on the production, and the fourth section is about the audience and who you're targeting. And so obviously our core audience ideally would have been the African diaspora, and then the distributor who came on board took that was their focus as well. And so, I really think that, and then beyond that film, actually, the BFI has also supported me as a producer with some company funding, and they funded last year, I think, 15 emerging producers. And again, at the core of who they were going to give that money to, you had to be meeting these standards. And I have a very diverse slate, and so it really has given me that boost to keep making these films. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, hello, I'm Simon Hakrimo Paetau. I'm a filmmaker and theater maker. I just recently finished my first experimental feature. I do my films as a directing duo with Thais Gisasola, who was in the audience as well. And I very much connect to the idea if we don't look in the past and know we don't know who we are, and especially as queer people who are very often born into non-queer families, there's this always reinvention, and I think there's a lot of lost traces of history. So as well in my theater work, where we're looking at the Tunden movement, AIDS activism of 80s in Berlin, reappropriating them from a post-colonial perspective, as well as my film where we're dealing with ancestral knowledge and patterns of lost indigenous traces which weren't taught to us by our families these are the topics I'm tackling, and I'm in the run with Days for a new film project, which is based in Berlin and talking about 2 generations of mother, ex-FARC guerrilla, and the daughter, a Latinx Colombian trans daughter, and the idea, what does war mean? Because I think this is something as well. Being on the street can as well be a war. So what does war mean?
Okay, thank you, Simon. Some of you have underlining the importance of the knowledge of the history. I think history is something really important, so there is knowledge in the world. It's not that we don't know about these issues, and I would like to start with the history, and I would like to start with you, Karola, because I'm asking myself, what can we learn for the other communities from the women's movement? I mean, this is a very long movement. You have been influenced from the second wave of the women movement in Germany, from the 70s on. So what has been achieved so far, and what is the status of the gender issue nowadays in the film business from your perspective?
Well, history, I think, is the core at every reflection, of course. As I said before, in order to understand, and as you have just said, where we are and what our politics can be, we should know where we come from. It's also very encouraging.
Excuse me, is the microphone on?
I hope so.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
It's also very encouraging to see that that we can go back to things that have been done before, that have been thought about before, and that have been put on film. I give you an example. I was at the Pro Quota film the other day, and they showed a lovely clip by Rigoletti, Garbage Women, where the roles were turned around, and it reminded me of a very early film from the 1970s, which did exactly this in form of a comedy, which was fantastic and which had a huge impact on me, which was called Nehmen Sie's wie ein Mann, Madame, Take It as a Man, Madam. So I'm not saying to people who are making films now, oh, this has been done before, but it is to make clear that you are in an imaginary structure, which is a flux, and it's not always moving forward, but it's also going back, and we have to see this in order to position ourselves. Your question about what has been, are there any changes? There are, but on the other hand, the debate we're having now and we're having in this panel shows very clearly that the situation is still very complicated. A lot has to be done, and I'm very happy to see that there is a strength coming out of a very broad community. And it's not the first time in my professional life, which goes back maybe 35, 40 years now, that there is such an impact. And I can only hope that this is a situation which will bring a very strong change about, because I don't think it can go on like this. We have heard this in all the contributions. Did this answer your question? Or?
Yes and no. What kind of change is needed? So how would the system look like if it wasn't sexistic, if it wasn't racist, etc.? So what is still needed? I mean, a lot of things have been achieved, but what... If you could think the utopia, how would it look like? Okay, my question is, I'll be more precise. So it's not only about numbers, it's not only about quota. We are also speaking about contents. So about aesthetics, about images, representation. What is for you a feminist film work?
Oh, this question is even worse. There was a strong debate at the end of the 70s.
Yes, that's why I'm asking.
Early 80s, in which Heide Schlöppmann and I, for example, were engaged in a magazine called Frauen und Film, which was founded by Helke Sander in the 70s, and we continued the work in Frankfurt from the early 80s. And there was a strong opposition against the notion of Frauenfilm, women's film, because it was used against the women, I have to say. Oh, this is a Frauenfilm, we don't have to have the women look at it. We men, we don't have to. It's a women's film. So we said it's important to say it's a feminist film, which implies that the film can contribute to bringing about a change in your consciousness, for example, and eventually lead to action and change. There was a definition about what's a feminist film, what's a gay film, actually, which was introduced by the great, wonderful Richard Dyer in '77, who said a gay film is made by a gay person for gay people dealing with gay issues and for a gay audience. I wouldn't say that this is history in a way. A feminist film has to open up a space, and allow reflection upon social conditions which need to be changed or even to be looked at in order to make you aware. I can't say, it's very difficult to answer this question, what is a feminist film? It can be many, many different films, I think.
Mm. Yeah, maybe we can postpone it, because this is something I would like to discuss with all of you, since we're talking for sure also about contents. Is there something like a female aesthetic? Is there a migrant aesthetic? Is there a black aesthetic? There's a debate on this. So I would like to speak with you about that a little bit later. But Sheri, maybe we can pass to you. You were saying that you founded your own company, so you have your own producer, and your film was produced by yourself. So was that a necessity, or how is it for you to be independent and not to depend on other producers, Entschuldigung, sorry. Because this is something I also recognize in the migrant movement, for example. I don't know, people like Fatih Akin, because he never got funding, then he founded his own company. So is this an effect because the funding bodies and the institutions are not ready yet and don't have this diverse gaze, let's say? Or what was the motivation for you to make yourself independent?
Yes, I was forced to, because I still feel that the German film institutions and the public broadcastings are still creating an environment which do not allow all creative talents of the society to reflect and to shape the society, and that's very necessary, because talking about the past, in the past, Germany has a racist past. And a lot of people are still, voices are still missing in this racist past, because we do not see, just to talk about the past, we do not see, just like we know in which street we are all sitting. And this street is connected with German colonization. And if coming to this street, I think of Ghana, I think of Namibia, and which means we still haven't from till now, a black perspective with and from dealing with this issue. There are no stories, we only have the white perspectives dealing with this issue, but not the black perspectives. And it's important for the past to understand the past by showing all sides. So this is missing. And if this keeps on missing, which means then the present is still racist, because that's why I'm here, because we don't not showing our past, because we have Black German also in the fourth and the fifth generation who experienced racism, also in the Second World War. We never show the perspective in the Second World War in all the stories, because German films love to show films about Second World War. They love to show films about the wall, about the East Germany. And in all these, you've never have the Black perspective in the Second World War and in the East Germany, because there are also Black East Germans, and we never see their stories, we never hear their stories, and they also have voices. So if we miss this past, because past has got different shapes and reflections and different perspectives. So if you miss one perspective and we only tell one single story, which means with one single story you support discrimination, you feed fear, and you support racism. So we shouldn't be surprised when we've got the AFD. So, and that's why I think we have to deal with the past also from different perspectives. We have to deal with the present also in different perspectives in order to have, or to I won't say, I think we're humans, and there's always going to be racism part of humanity, part of human beings. But in order to keep the racism small in the future, we have to change the gates today. So we have to rebuild the system and broaden the system. And which means there are underrepresented groups in this German society, which means women over 40 are gone, which means lesbian, gays, transsexual, bisexual. I hardly see films of them. I do see some films of white gays, and that's it. And then which means also Blacks and Asian perspective. Till today, there hasn't been a film funded by a Black and with a Black perspective. And also, I do not see Asians. We all eat Asian food, but where are their films? So that's what we're working on. So we need to, I believe, our claims. Am I allowed to talk about our claims? Yes.
Please, please.
We've got 3 claims. I'm a huge fan, Emily, I just told you about it. I think the BFI diversity standards is so simple and it's so easy to take over. So what we want the German film funding institutions, the public broadcastings, and the German Film Academy to take over the BFI British diversity standards. That's the first thing. The second is we want the communities and juries of the film funding institutions, of the public broadcastings, of the film universities and festivals to have be occupied by 20% of people of migration background, because they're missing there. And then the last thing is we want an annual gender monitoring on intersectional basis, which means in order to see how diversity is being supported or not. And these are the 3 claims we have. And the German film funding institution did it with bringing access for people with disabilities in order to change the law. So which means each film receiving funding has to have an audio description and have to have a subtitle for people with hearing disabilities. And that changed a lot in the film business, because suddenly they had access on screen, they had access behind scenes and in the audience. And we want the same thing for Black perspectives, Asian perspectives, for people with disabilities, and for Muslims.
Yeah, that seems... This is so clear, and there's also a press release by the ISD, Initiative Schwarze Menschen, the initiative of the Black communities here in Germany, related to the Berlinale. We are within the Berlinale here, and a lot of initiatives of the African, Afro-diasporic and Black communities here in Germany have claimed for more diversity within the media. And my impression is that a lot of achievements, that a lot of changes in society and in the media come from the bottom. So it's about self-organization, is about the organization of the marginalized groups. So I would like to ask you, how are you organized? How you support yourselves? How does it work? I mean, the same was with the women's movement. It doesn't start from the state. It starts from below, and then people organize themselves. Hopefully, in the end, then something is changing, like the diversity standards in the UK, etc. So, how are you organized? How do you support yourself?
Like I said, we're still on Facebook, but we're thinking about building and starting an association. And me, myself, personally, I was forced to build on my own, to start a film production company, which is more or less interested in Black perspectives, of course. And but we are diverse. So, but we like I said, we are on screen, behind scenes, and in the audience. So we support each other by informing each other, combining each other, and developing new stories. And so there are, I think, already 6 ready to finance. And so I hope at least one is going to receive funding.
Okay. Yeah, so it's about an alternative
excuse me,
storytelling.
I would just like to introduce, because there's some of us sitting here in the audience. Please just stand up so everyone can see, to see just how different we all are. Jerry, Salem, Jonathan. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's about storytelling, about an alternative history, and about doing things together, not about us without us. I mean, that's the point. Because you can have people who invite you with a single film, but if the structure is still dominated by the privileged groups, nothing will change. And maybe the quota or the standards can be a way. It's not the aim, but it can be a way. And this is what I would like to ask you, Emily. You come from the UK, you're a producer, and we have been speaking about the diversity standards of the British Film Institute. Can you please elaborate a little bit on this? So how exactly does it work? How are these standards applied? Who is mentoring them? So how can you really make sure that they are applied?
So yeah, they did a pilot scheme just on production funding, I think a year or so ago, and now it's been rolled out across everything that the BFI funds. So that's production development, audience development, you know, sort of everything, new talent, short film scheme. So whenever you do, and they have a kind of formal application process, like I guess all funds do, with an online form, but you can't, because I did one 2 days ago, you now can't get to the end through that form without having ticked those boxes. On at least 2 of the areas that I mentioned before. And so it's just a gateway. You literally can't get through to even be considered for funding unless you're qualifying in those areas. And then it kind of continues through. So for a development application, you have to have done that. And then at each point of the process, while you're being funded, you have to keep being accountable to what you've said about your project and how diverse it is. And there's no, I think they also, because I was rereading the guidelines, they do have, you know, there is a small print where they say in exceptional circumstances we don't have to have, you know, gone by all this, because I think it can't be positive discrimination because that's actually illegal, but it's targets that they're really, really driven to meet in their next 5-year plan, which I think is 50-50 gender balance. I think it's 20%, there's even a phrase for it in the UK, BAME, which is black and ethnic minority. And I think the LGBT quota is 7%, I think. But yeah, so they're their targets. And then their main way of trying to reach these is through the form and through the constant surveys and assessments of how you're... And I remember, like, my interviews for projects as well, when you go in for the funding, they really quiz you on it as well, and they want to know, yeah.
So, and how did it come? I mean, was there a struggle also from below, let's say? Were there unrepresented groups in UK fighting for more visibility, or how was the way to the diversity standards?
Definitely, there's always been, there's Directors UK is a big organisation for it, but I wouldn't say it's been actually hugely organised. And so I've seen more groups popping up in the past few years, like Cine Sisters, which is another collective of directors, and then there's a brilliant new organisation of female DOPs called Illuminatrix, where it's a brilliant name, isn't it? And so really what I think so great about what they've done is they've got a website where all the female DOPs have got their showreels and everything. So it's just become it's a real functioning resource for people who are going to look for a DOP for their next film, their next feature. And they can just go onto that website just the way they'd call the agents to ask who's available. They can go on there. It's a resource as well as being a kind of cry for visibility and within the industry, because I know that area and the technical departments are struggling just hugely with. I've seen it with my eyes, just the sexism there is in the camera teams and things. So, yeah.
We were speaking about the film, your first feature film you produced, I'm Not a Witch, by Rungano Nioni. This film is considered one of the first films that meets the standards, 3 or 4 standards. Why is this film diverse? I mean, I love this film, I've seen it, it's very poetic, it's very resistant. So what's diverse about it?
So in terms of the on-screen representation, it's all set in Africa and it's all Zambian actors, and it's about a little girl who's accused of being a witch. And it's just it's a story told from a black perspective, and it's also, I think, Rungano's phrase throughout the making of the film, which links in with what Sheri was saying, was she didn't want to make a Deja Africa film. She didn't want it to be the same images we always see, and she wanted it to be original. So, and then she's a woman of colour as the director, and our team, as a producer, I'm also a woman. And then it was we used a lot of trainees in the film, so. A lot of our assistants had never worked on a film before, so they were new to the film industry. So we were kind of growing the industry there in Zambia as well, and sort of we felt like we were trailblazing, really, because so many people who hadn't worked on films and it was their first experience. And then also in terms of the distribution, which also the BFI helped with some funding for our distributor to target underrepresented audiences and to get them into the cinemas and to give and market towards those audiences so that they would see the film. So it was just a constant thread throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Simon, you said that you are a filmmaker and also into theater. You did many performances here at the Ballhaus Nauninstraße, at the Gorki, and your pieces have been shown at the Documenta 14, so really a huge recognition. But you didn't get funding from film institutions, and you wrote an open letter to the Kuratorium Junger Deutscher Film, the Curatorium of the Young German Film. What's going wrong in the film business? So, and what is the difference maybe to the visual arts, to the theater scene? Is there a difference? Is it debated differently? What is your perspective on this? So can we learn something from the other arts?
I think in Berlin there has been very strong networks of people in the theater who have been like kicking in the doors. No? So of course I think we're picking the fruits and in the line, of course, of Ballhaus and Gorki, but as well like I saw Bahare Sharifi. So people are as well like in the funding institutions, and it's of course, but still a limited space in a way, no? That we're only interested as long as we talk about our own identity, but like tackling other questions. So I think identity is a trap very often as well. So yeah, only if we tackle like let's say queer trans issues we get funded, but if we want to do a film about environmental questions from like a queer perspective, which I think then it doesn't get funded. No? So I think identity is as well a trap and can be a limiting space. Yeah, I don't think I answered your question. If theater is different, yeah, but yes, through these networks, I think in Berlin there was a strong resistance, and this is why I started as well doing theater. And of course, in film, I see that there exists Fatih Akin, but I don't see that this talking about the other, like that this is a contradiction, or that it hasn't really gone through yet, that you cannot think about that how is the value system of a person who has not worked on it, who doesn't have the knowledge of that topic, and then wants to fund a film which is tackling black issues or queer issues. And I think that this is, so I don't want to personalize it, and I think it's going to run through all the funding institutions in Germany. So it's not of a specific institution, it's really through all of them. Yeah, so it's very important to not personalize this, and that's a structural problem which is running through all the institutions.
Yeah. And what were you claiming in this letter, and what was the response? How did the Kuratorium Junger Deutscher Film react?
We had a very nice talk actually last week at the Berlinale. So I'm very happy that we had this conversation, and as well there's a strong female. It's very there are a lot of women running the curatorium, and I feel as well through the conflict kind of we came together and sat down, and I think this was very nice. Yeah.
So, but maybe you can say what for the audience what you were claiming in this letter and how they reacted in regard to these contents. I mean,
yeah. So I definitely what I said in my keynote. No? So I don't think that it's enough. That I think we become tokens if we just it's not about we funded an Iranian film. That's not the issue, yeah. And so there is a very strong. So all the regional funding institutions in Germany. I mean, there's this problem of there's Filmstiftung NRW. They are not diverse, you know. And so if they are, for example, the judges of the curatorium, and they are not people of the free scene, of course it's not going to be diverse, because these funding institutions, the regional funds are not diverse at all. So I think the judges or the people who decide over the projects first need to be diverse, and then need to be in the free scene, because in the regional film fundings there are no diverse people. Secondly, I really believe that we need to, now I lost the track. So that is super important. Talking what I was saying. Now I forgot.
I've got something I was wanting to add actually to what I said as well, and I think it links to what you're saying, that I think this issue of perspective is so important, that it can't be a tokenistic thing, and that's why, going on about these diversity standards, it can't be like, because we should do that, and it's moral to do that, and it's right to do that. I think what's important is that it's a real valuing of the kind of the quality that there is in diversity and difference, and that it even potentially from a commercial perspective, that if you are then finding these audiences that aren't even drawn to going to the cinema or watching content because it's never for them, there's even a commercial perspective. So I think it's about, I think there is that, the quality of difference I think is key, and for it not to be, just tokenistic.
Yeah, and this is what I'm missing. So I think it needs to be really revalued completely, like how film funding in Germany works, because if not, we're constantly running against these walls. So this is what I meant. I don't want to personalize, because it needs to run through all the. And it produces different aesthetics. I think we cannot stay with identity politics in the sense of, because our aesthetics are different and they are not seen, they are not understood.
This is the situation in Germany. I would like to come back to you, Christopher. How is the situation in the USA? You have a long experience with the Outfest UCLA Legacy Project. It started in '82 with Outfest, then in 2005, Outfest went into partnership with the UCLA Film and Television Archive, and it's a huge project, not only in terms of items, but it's because you're doing restoration, you're programming, it's a research project. So it's production, programming, curation, education at the same time in a very huge dimension. How did everything start? So what kind of movement was this? And how do you had to deal with the institutions? I mean, are there diversity standards in the USA? How does it work?
Harvey Weinstein is helping us with some standards. He had no standards. That's a complex question. Outfest grew out of a lack of representation. It was a group of academics on the campus of UCLA, University in Los Angeles, who held a 3-day media conference, who had only a handful of images they could show. There were panels and discussions. And it was evidence of a bigger problem, which they didn't even realize at the time. The films were all about white men. There was Taxi Zoom Clos, there was a few other films that were there, and these are the people that started the organization. They had access to filmmaking tools, so those were the films that were getting made, those were the films they could find. At least it started. You know, an exhibition was incredibly important. When you don't see yourself, you don't feel valued. When you don't see yourself, other people don't understand you. You know, we have grown. We work both within the system and without. Outfest, while based in Los Angeles, programmers from around the world come to our festival in the summer and will copy our program because we spend the year searching the globe from Sundance to Toronto to the Berlinale, what have you, to find the most representative group of films we can. And then the smaller festival that doesn't have access to that can look at that program and use it as representation. But we've really, and obviously the archive is an incredibly important tool when you talk about history. Women in Uniform, I will try never to butcher your language, I am sorry. German film, Alles aus die anderen, 1919 German film made in Weimar Republic. First gay protagonist. We restored it, took it back full photochemical restoration, premiered it back at the Berlinale 2 years ago. Shows that things have both changed and not changed because we're facing the same problems. But really our job now is to dismantle the system because this is systemic. And again, what I touched on at the beginning, the system also starts with us because even within the community, even myself, so much of what we are all facing, and I'm not saying anything you don't know, is fear of the feminine. Fear of the feminine, you know, has constructed a system. Fear of the feminine, even within the queer community, has set up a hierarchy and has stopped permissions and access and entry. So it is really starting with us, addressing that, being open and honest about it, really understanding how to be best allies and show up for one another and drive that forward into the film system. Going back again, history and what we've learned from the past, queer organizing, obviously there was Stonewall riots, which were led by the trans community. Then there was the AIDS crisis that taught us to organize, but the face was usually a gay white male, even though it affected everybody. And the lesbians who helped and were such a big part of that were shut out in representation. So we're learning, yeah, this is how we can organize, but this is where we did it wrong, so that we can continue to improve and continue to include and continue to create space. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons is we can teach you how to create a space so that you are invited in, you are a part of. Ava DuVernay just gave a talk I was at, and she used a great term. She used to say diversity, then she moved into inclusion. She's moved on to belonging, because belonging is a very important emotional word. We all need to feel like we belong in this space, that you accept that we should belong in this space. And I really like that because that touches such a heart issue for all of us. And that's really, I think, what we're all trying to build. So, you know, we're starting with the system, the queer community. We're chipping away at the Hollywood system. We are all from the outside doing it. Women in Film was mentioned, great institution, but had to be assembled outside and work its way in. Outfest had to be assembled outside, work its way in. Pan-African Film Festival and everything they do had to be organized on the outside and work its way in. Black House, another group, outside, work its way in. NALEP, National Association of Latino Independent Producers, outside, work its way in, because the inside wasn't doing it. I'm grateful at this period of time the dialogue has changed and the inside is being forced, whether they want to or not, to do it. And at least they're doing it, and then I think the mindset will follow. And that is my hope. I may not have answered your question.
I'm very interested in this space, and I would like to pose this question to all of us. So, what kind of space is that? What are the characteristics of these spaces? I mean, we were talking about the different initiatives and the different communities. For sure, these communities are not homogeneous. Each community is very heterogeneous. So what do you all think about this relation between creating safe spaces, so to remain within the own community, let's say, and in relation to build up collaborations with the other communities? Because what we were saying in the beginning, the aim is an intersectional perspective, an intersectional approach. So we're fighting for the same thing, let's say, for more visibility of the underrepresented, marginalized groups. So what do you think about this relation of safe space and common spaces? Does anybody has an idea on this?
Yes, I find them very, very important. We have to collaborate also with different groups, because me myself, I'm black, I'm female, and for the film industry, I'm old. So, which means I perfectly fit to the
20.
Right. I perfectly fit to the pro quota 50-50 because of being female and old. So I do support them, and I wish all female filmmakers to support pro quota 50-50. It's important. And then I perfectly fit to WIFT, Women in Film and Television, because it's ridiculous just to see now for the first time a DOP talking about the American system. She's white, she's female, and she's a DOP. And it's just like 2018, we have the first DOP being nominated. It's ridiculous. And it's also ridiculous from the black side. So I was happy when they said Oscar's so white. I say German film funding so white.
Berlinale jury is so white.
Berlinale is so white. Where are the black films from black filmmakers with black filmmakers? Where are the films with and from a black perspective at the Berlinale from the German side? I haven't since been at the Berlinale. I haven't seen one single film from a black filmmaker, from a German black filmmaker. So where are they? And where are they in the jury? Where are they in the committees? So we really need some more work. So it's missing. And so that's why I do think we have to collaborate, because that's the only way to be strong and stay strong and be visible and say we want to be heard, we want to be seen. It's our duty to be seen, because Article 3, equality of the German law, it's equality. But the film funding or the film industry is not dealing with equality. Or Article 15A from the UN Social Pact says participation, but black stories, Asian stories, stories of people with disabilities, stories of gays, gays, and lesbians, they are not there, so we are not participating in cultural life, but it's also us paying the taxes. So we are also part of the, from the profit, we are part of the films, but we are not being seen. So they are breaking the laws. So we need to be seen and heard.
I just want to say, because I didn't want to come across that I defend Kuratorium Deutscher Film. For me, it is very important what, like in the moment, like we sit down and we talk about our differences. This is why I have sometimes a problem with this idea of safer space. I think we will not get a lot if we are like a conflict-free space. I really don't believe in it. I think only through conflict and through understanding the conflicts of the other and the oppression of others, we can be really an ally for each other and not just say, oh, I'm not racist, I'm not sexist, you know? But yes, you are if you don't reflect that you're being racist by not like reflecting your own colonial history, and that there's still not one black or POC or trans person in the funding body. So this is what was very important for me to, I didn't come to that. And that this needs to happen. So I feel there's this fear of losing something, you know, there's this fear of, oh, like somebody is taking over my privilege. I think, yes, everybody needs to check their privileges, and everybody has the spots where you cannot see the other. And only through the conflict, and it's like a process, you know.
And isn't it also about awareness? I mean, should... I'm thinking of the Afro-American writer and theorist Bell Hooks, who speaks a lot about awareness. So I'm asking myself, should everybody working in the film business, not only the ones who are addressed as so-called others, but every editor, everybody in the funding bodies, etc., like do workshops on post-colonial theory, on migration history, on the story of LGBTI community, etc. Don't we need more awareness within the system, within the institutions? Okay, yes. You want to take one of these things, please?
Hello. Yes, short answer. And I'll tell you what we've done. We started, again, internally, and I have a phrase that our organization hates: wash, rinse, repeat. Because once is not enough. You have to wash the brain, rinse it out. Then 6 months later, wash it again, rinse it out. Because it doesn't stick the first time. And we have picked one segment at a time so that we can go deep. So 2 years ago, it was a focus on women. I'm incredibly proud that last year our festival had 50-50 women directors, male directors, and within that it is trans women identified under women, trans men identified under men. So I don't want to leave that out. But it was working with our board of directors and bringing in a panel of women to talk about the issues they're facing and, you know, shoot the guys between the eyes. If we were going to end up talking about microaggressions and what that is, we were going to end up talking about microaggressions. And like you said, make them uncomfortable, make them have the dialogue, and then work its way down. We do that with our staff. We do that with our volunteers, so that we create an organization and an organism that has an ethos that we are taking out into the world. We have to walk the walk. We can't preach it if we're not doing it. So that's kind of where we started. And really, and it's been a painful process, and within it, I've relearned a great deal, and I've had to re-examine myself. My racism, my sexism, my transism, any of the isms have come up in that process. And we'll do it again in 6 months.
I would like to come back to one point you pointed out, Emily. It's the commercial part. So I'm a little bit skeptic in regard to the diversity concept, and this is an open question. In many cases, diversity is embedded into a neoliberal logic that aims only the commercial factor and doesn't really have a political issue, let's say. So what do you think about, I mean, how do we deal with this ambivalence that everybody in every funding body, in every institution is talking about diversity, but is there really a political I don't even know it in German. I mean, is there really, do they really want to change something in our society in terms of representation, in terms of political change? So,
I think Sheri actually pointed out something which I hadn't even thought of before, that with cultural funding, it's coming from taxpayers who are, you know, it's just so simple, really.
Yes.
And actually, it's against the law. I can't believe I hadn't thought of that before, but it's true. Like, politically, and yeah, it's their duty, really, to be catering to those audiences. But then when it comes to, I think the really hard part to target is, you know, and all my funding so far and my kind of breakthrough as a producer has come from the BFI. But if I'm to go and target more commercial money, I'm yet to break through in that area. So. Although I was actually having an encouraging conversation with someone who works in advertising the other day who did say they also have big remits for diversity now. Whether it's really coming through, I don't know. It's going to take a long time, but at least it seems to be part of the consciousness from what he was saying. Works at a big agency in New York, I think, but I don't know.
Obviously, in Hollywood and in the US, we have no government funding. And we are not just a capitalist society. I think we're a consumerist society. So it is all about earning the maximum profit. My friend Tamika Miller has started a movement, Black Films Travel, because there was a perception in the industry, there still is, hopefully Black Panther may change that a little bit. Everybody please see it. Please see it twice, see it in the theaters, keep it in the theaters. That's how you show that Black films travel. Because there's a theory that they don't make money, and that's not true. And across the globe, Black films make money. But commercialism drives us, and we are a society of fear. We are afraid we'll lose the money, and our shareholders will then be upset and then put their money elsewhere. So commercialism really is a sad fact that we're fighting against. I actually think the streamers are a salvation, because Netflix and Amazon, who we work with a lot, are buying and creating content for an international audience. They want all of their content to play across multiple territories, so they actually are looking at diversity in front of the camera, behind the camera, at every level. I actually know this for a fact because they come to us and say, who are the queer voices we should be looking at? Who are the trans voices we should be looking at? And are staffing up. So they give me hope. They're not there yet, but they give me hope. And the other thing that's helping to change, actually, is the commercial world. Commercials. The beauty industry in the US has done a great job of starting to switch things, in that the big cosmetics companies are finally representative of the diverse mix of people that they sell product to. They may not be doing it for the right reasons, but when every day you see 4 commercials that have multiracial people in it, you are changing minds. Every day when those commercials go out and their product sales go up, you are changing those shareholder minds. So even that move is helping us in terms of inclusivity and belonging. I don't even care if they're doing it for the wrong reasons, because it is still affecting society in a positive way. And I think that's very interesting from a larger, even more global perspective.
Sheri wanted to say something in there. Yes.
I do agree and disagree because, yes, which is good, because what you said is good, but also because with the commercials, and I also have Nestle in mind. And Nestle is just a good example for using diversity. Right, right. So we have to be careful with that too. And but I think maybe because I just started so small and we're still kind of in our group, we're a growing group, but we're still, compared to the other groups, still small. But I really think, I'm speaking now from Germany, we have to, the German law, the German film funding law has to change in order to rebuild the system and in order to open up for all creative talents from the society, because I believe if the German law changes, and it's just a law, because Germany only functions with laws. So if they change the law and open up the gate for diversity, then we're going to receive more stories that are going to be funded, because they have to be funded, just like they did in Britain. They just noticed you can make money, black film can sell. And we've got good examples like Shimana Adichie, we've got Chris Abani, we've got Shonda Rhimes, we've got Denzel Washington. These are all black figures working in the industry for a black perspective. And they showed that their stories can sell. And they're out, and people want to see these stories. Even Ava DuVernay, she's a great role model. She's Dee Reese. Now, Dee Reese, her DOP is now nominated for the Oscar. So that's what we need. And I totally believe the German funding law has to change in order to have, to give diversity access on screen, behind scenes, and in the audience. Yeah.
I'm very critical of like big companies using struggles. Like in the case of Germany, I feel there is strong that there are homo nationalists, like pinkwashing as well, are saying, oh no, now gay people can be married in Germany, you know, but what is if you're like an illegal or asylum seeker living in Germany, like who has this access to citizenship and nationality and belonging? So I'm very critical about that, and especially with like big money. I mean, there's a strong connection between capital and colonialism, you know, and it's another form of continuation of colonialism in an economic way. So I'm very afraid of that. And I just want to quote Lina Quebrada, go and see Bisha Travesti, amazing, at Berlinale. And she was saying Brazil has now Pablo Vittar as the biggest, like it's a drag queen actually, but the biggest pop star. And at the same time, Brazil is the country with most trans people being killed in everyday life. So there's a big relationship between desire and violence, and it's the biggest country with the biggest trans pornography. So I'm very critical because representation of visibility doesn't mean that being on the street you get like bashed, beaten up, or that a poor person has all this access. So it's very complicated, but I think we can't stay at visibility.
I also have my doubts that it can be positive or can change something if the potential of diversity is getting soaked up in a consumerism and capitalism. As long as we stay in this structure, how should change be brought about?
It's interesting. Please.
I looked at the internet yesterday because I thought I'm going to this panel about diversity, maybe I should have a look. And there was Wikipedia with an entry, sociological aspects, describing the political movement, and then there were pages and pages and pages of how diversity is brought into concepts of the industry, and how diversity is used to make function big companies and enterprises more smoothly. So we are being functionalized. This concept is being functionalized. I find this very, very dangerous. And I would like to add, it's the same with the quota. I'm very much in favor of it at the moment, because I think if the quota is not being introduced, it will take much longer, or it's very difficult to change things. But at the same time, if, say, 50% of women who got into important positions get soaked and adapted by a repressive, patriarchal, capitalist structure, it's useless.
And it sparked this dialogue, which is what I love. I mean, that's the whole point, is that some people are going to take away the fact that Revlon is saying dark, dark black women are beautiful, and are going to take that away and see themselves. And some people are going to say Revlon is tokenizing, That's a great dialogue. And we're each taking away something that I truly believe in the end moves us forward. And that's just my personal belief. But this is the difference we should be having, and this is why we should have these panels, is we push, and each of us takes something different away.
Okay, we have different positions, and for sure this is a very, very complex theme. I would now like to open up it to the public and to ask you for your contributions, for your questions to the panelists. Is there a mic, or you want to take one of these?
So, I have the mic, so
you have the power to speak.
which kind of looks like something else, but that's another point. First of all, thank you very much for presenting often in your second or third language so clearly and so well prepared. I don't like red things, but under the circumstances, I found everything very coherent and to the point. Thank you. And for the diverse opinions and experiences, that was great. I'm extremely interested in finding ways to reach other publics by using and sharing the networks that you have already. Because for me, diversity is more than just creating. It's also having other people show up at your screenings or events who would never in a million years come. Like, why are you doing it? And it's something I face with my own film right now. Some people know about it. And therefore, I'm right in the middle of it. And so I want to know everybody you've ever known in your life. And how do you share your network so you're not just appealing to, let's say, your core audience and their friends and mothers and children. You know, I want to reach out. So thank you. And I live in Berlin, but I'm Canadian, and voila. Well.
I know.
Does anybody want to answer? Was it more comment, or was it?
That's a question.
Okay, thank you very much. Over there?
Yeah, hi. My name is Liz Rosenfeld. I'm a Berlin-based filmmaker. I'm from the States. I'm also German, so I have dual citizenship here, and I've been working here as part of the queer filmmaking scene for the last 10 years. Have established a collective called Now Moment Now with Imogen Heath and Sam Icklo, who are also Berlin, and Sam's actually in LA now. Anyway, we work from feminist and queer strategies of filmmaking, specifically responding to not just our own work, but the work of our cohort and how hard it is for queer people, marginalized people to get funding. And as a result, we have, in the last years, basically provided alternative structures of support and economy in making our own films, in terms of creating our own productions on our own time, finding ways to borrow professional equipment where we, don't necessarily have to rent it. And I mean, from that, some great things have happened, and people have produced, first films that have gone on to win awards, that have gone on to get some funding, myself included. And this was great because it was a self-initiative that presented a different way of making and existing. I have a few questions. One is there anybody here from German Film Funding? And were they invited? Great. I was just curious. And my other question is, this is kind of particularly in the realm of, for kind of a question for you, Christopher, but also like a general question. My knowledge of Outfest, as it's a festival I followed for a long time as a queer filmmaker, as I know, I have many friends who have shown there, but I also know it as like a very corporate structure, and I know many people who have had films turned away from Outfest due to kind of often the responses, the films weren't kind of maybe mainstream enough, or they dealt with like overt sexuality in a way that was like maybe too explicit, kind of like different ways of representing queerness that was possibly, as people had felt, maybe not in like the main program of Outfest was possible to show. But I'm curious that when that happens, because I know that you now have several different platforms for showing film, as I understand. I'm curious if there are ways that Outfest, and this is a question for all programmers and festivals, when you see work that is maybe too experimental, or as a lot of queer work does, it borders on sexually explicit but not specifically pornography, or even too political, which is often the response that I know Simone and myself have gotten from German film funding. This is too queer, this is too inaccessible, who is this for? I'm curious if there are discussions about how to actually create space around films that are hard to program and hard to show and hard to fund, like how to actually make structures to support that work that doesn't fit into, and I don't necessarily mean like a corporate standard, but into a standard that is considered to be more kind of mainstream or accessible. I hope that was clear. Thank you.
I think that's an absolutely terrific question, and I think many larger festivals face something similar. And I will say, I imagine your friends were pre my tenure. We've changed a lot at Outfest. We continue to work very hard to be much more representative of our community and embracing. There are times where we come up against too sexually explicit, and sadly it is a corporate reason. There is no government funding really for the arts in America. We get 1/3 of our funding from large corporations, and if something is too far out there, occasionally it's problematic. We do have a special section during the festival called Platinum, and it is specifically for our more experimental, transgressive, sexually explicit, exploratory films, and that's always been a part of it. And it is a smaller part of a larger festival, so oftentimes there's not room. And there may be a number of other reasons the film was turned away, disguised in those responses. Programmers always are finding, the sad truth is, no one wants to turn away a film. We're all here to be filmmakers' friends, but sometimes something doesn't fit, and you're trying to find the easiest way to let them know it doesn't fit. Currently, myself and Lucy Mukherjee, who is our director of programming, have a very different ethos. It is 100% about representation. It is about the fact that if there is only one film representative of a First Nations or Indigenous population, and it's not very good, we're going to play it. And we're going to put it in a big enough theater that they realize we are putting value on it. And I, as the executive director making the dollar decisions, is going to say, we need to show we value this. And if 20 people show up and we lose money, fine. We're here to make sure that those members of that community see themselves and that filmmaker feels that they've been supported and moved on. That doesn't invalidate any statement that you made, because I am sure that is 100% the experience, and I do not argue it. But I think that you will find that we've matured and we've come to understand our mistakes and where we need to grow and are trying. And we still screw up. The other problem too is it's an issue of, it starts at the bottom. If you don't have equitable access to funding or means of making films, there are fewer of your films. Therefore, we play 190 films over 11 days. And if only 20 women's films get made that year because there's no access, they get outweighed. And it is truly not about what we're trying to do. So it's a really complex, awful issue. But it truly, I don't want to invalidate a single statement you made because it's true. We're working on it. And I think a number of festivals really are trying to do that. We're all waking up a little at a time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this panel. It's been really amazing to hear everybody. My name is Tsitsi. I come from Zimbabwe, but I studied in Germany at the DFFB.
It's on.
Yeah. At the DFFB, and I went back to Zimbabwe in despair, partly. Only it was going back to Zimbabwe, so that was another despair. What I really wanted to find out from Karola is, what progress have you seen for women in film in Germany? And the reason why I'm asking is that since I went back to Zimbabwe in despair at the end of the last millennium, I haven't seen a great deal of change racially in Germany. You know, we had Fatih Akin coming out, and the idea was that, oh, okay, things are finally going to change, but no, it remains one person who actually typifies what's going on by being the exception. I started working with Sheri. Sheri, thank you so much for inviting me here, in the 90s, and I can see the way she's struggling. Just last year, I had one of the most shocking experiences in my life. There is a wonderful German festival that does films with people off the European continent, and I sent in a project. And they look for co-producers for you. And one co-producer actually wrote back to me and said, Tsitsi, no one is interested in a film about racism. So immediately, once you start talking about the struggle of a person of color to do anything in Germany, the film is set here, you are located as talking about race, and we don't want to know. So has there been progress with women, and how can we use your experiences also to make sure that we have the right kind of progress concerning race? Finally, maybe this is something you also need to take to the European Union, you know, the adoption of the BFI and diversity, because they are really influential. So much of the funding comes from there, and that might be a good place to start. But I'd be happy to hear what you have to say, Karola.
I think with regard to the subject you have been talking about, we are on a zero level. I can try to answer it from the point of view of a curator. When we do programs around a specific topic, to begin with, we first have to go back to the films that we know, that we've seen. And we can do research. And we very often found ourselves in a situation where we ended up with a program, say, I'm inventing this, motherhood, you know? And we ended up with 10 films, and we say, oh, they're all white, Eurocentristic, you know, where are the other films? And this has more than one reasons, of course. there aren't many films because they don't get made, because they don't get support, they don't get funded. So it's extremely important to change this situation. And the other thing is that, as you have said, that we have to change. You know, the people, the curators, we have to rethink how we work, you know, and we have to make changes from the very beginning. But then you're asking which changes have been made. I mean, it's a step forward that within the new initiative, now I forgot the name, for heaven's sake, Pro Quota Film, has a group of people who represent the interest of people of color. So it's a beginning, and it has to be. We have to be aware of this and always take it into account and work together. And of course, in looking at the situation of women in film from the middle of the 70s in this country, which at the time was East Germany and West Germany, so you know, you can't globalize it. Progress has been made in as there are a much greater number of women, female students at the film academies, at the film schools. You know, this has changed, and there is a greater awareness in funding bodies, and I think the FFI is one of the pioneering ones in that respect. But as a whole, I think the situation is also rather disastrous.
Simone wants to say something. I totally agree with you, and I'm really proud. You just said, even if you've got one film out of a community, underrepresented community, you represent this film, because that's what I'm missing a lot with festivals, because festivals are also changing nowadays, and I used to think film festivals are for films and not for the economy, not for the profit. And when festivals are more and more chasing the profit, which means films, independent films have to be commercial in order to be seen, it takes away a large group of filmmakers' voices. And I think and community voices, because I've done only 2 films yet, but my films I only received the support with my films because of festivals, and festivals are so important because you're totally right, Tsitsi, she's a wonderful filmmaker. It's a pity because she did a wonderful film about motherhood. It's a pity you have to connect. I know, but what I'm saying, but you're also resource. No, I know, but you resource. No, what I'm saying is you resource. You keep films, so half of them has to be kept because it's just a black perspective with a black and about motherhood. Doesn't have to be motherhood as a title, but it's still an important film. So you have to get together because you need also her films. No, but what I want to say is that festivals are so important, and I'm not. I don't know how many festivals directors are here, but if you receive, I'm talking now to the festival directors, if you receive films from the underrepresented groups, it's necessary to show these films. They have to be screened, they have to be seen and heard, because that's our last platform, because it's even the only chance to find a distributor if you haven't got a distributor on your side or a broadcasting on your side. So if even the festivals do not take such films, then what are we talking about? Then we've got no chance, because the way to work and knock on the film funding institutions to open their doors. It starts with us. We all can change, and the more we change, and the more we open our seeing and hearing habits, the more we are part of the power.
I as well wanted to say something in that regards, because I think that collectivity and other forms of create other aesthetics as well. And so sometimes politics become very representational, and just like if there is like a multi-million-dollar film being political and performing politics, but I'm very interested in how different aesthetics can actually be more congruent with what they are saying. And so I think this is very important, because I mean, Thais and me, we could have never done the film. I was applying since 2011, and I never in Germany got film funding after Cannes, and I never got film funding. And so we said, fuck it, we go, and we did our film, and we did a crowdfunding, and then we resourced, of course, our community, and they were the ones who supported us. But on the other hand, it's like, oh, perhaps this film would have not be like this if it would have get funded. So I want to say we need to keep on doing films. This is super necessarily, and even if we don't get funded, we need to put them out there. Because if not, and we need to say, if they are going to do like every 3 years a film, we need to do as well a film. And then perhaps we find other ways of collective organization, exchanging labor which are not monetary-wise. We need to create other systems of labor as well. And yeah.
There were two more. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes. I just want to add something. One of the things I was missing in this, or I mean, you pointed that out, but like the discussion about diversity we have in is quite a new one. It's not like in the UK and the US. We're on a completely different point, and we don't have a systemic understanding what kind of like that means. The lack of diversity. It means kind of like systemic exclusion, and that is one of the main problems we are facing, that people don't understand what that actually means. So it becomes really kind of like, really whooshy in the terms of understanding, because what we have seen within the last years is that it becomes like when they say diversity, they understand kind of like internationalism, which is not what we're talking about. And then it becomes like those ones who are benefiting from those are the ones who are mostly privileged. Class privilege is, I think, one of the main factors working here. So in contrast what you were saying earlier with the pro quota, I haven't heard that they were talking about like men and women, but never in a kind of like, it's not about like male in general, but it's like able-bodied, white, male, middle class or upper class who are in those positions. So pro quota is just kind of like, they are mostly white middle class women who kind of like fighting for themselves, but not taking up any struggle around them. So this is one of the things kind of like we are missing when we are not talking about intersectionality in a kind of like a progressive in a critical way. And this is what we need. I mean, like, yeah, this is one of the discussions we need to have in Germany, to have an understanding, because in the end, we're not getting anywhere. I mean, like, maybe more white women will be, white middle class, able-bodied women, cisgendered, will be represented, but that doesn't, kind of like for a lot of us, that doesn't get anywhere. So yeah, those are the things we need to talk about, because like diversity in general doesn't get us anywhere unless we talk about intersectionality.
Yes. Thank you very much for that, because I'm now a member of pro quota because out of these reasons, because I said it's beautiful to have 50-50 with white males and white females, but wait a second, we're still there too. We are also people of color, black people living here in this society. So we want the diversity of this German society to be reflected also in pro quota, which means, and I would really beg you to join pro quota and to join my work with pro quota about diversity, because I think, because if you want to change something, you have to work on the changes, because we can't only just sit there and say this is going wrong. We have to be active. So if you really want to change, if you want to have diversity also in pro quota, join pro quota and claim and say you want diversity, because that's the only chance we have to change things. And I believe in changing. I believe in talking and working. That's why I started to write my own stories, because I said I don't receive these images. I want my heart to have my own images. So I go out and do it. And I've got great filmmakers sitting here of color, and I mean people of color. I'm not only speaking for the black people. I also mean I'm also Asian people, also people of disability. There's so many talents out there who are not only white, and not only white males. So we need all these differences, and we need all these different perspectives. And I believe if diversity has been taken over into the, we have them in staff, we have them in program, and we have them in the audience, then we're gonna receive changes. Yeah.
I really want to point out something in regards to nation, because I feel a nation, first and second generation of migrants get as well like played out each other. What is happening is there are mostly like white curators, like in Berlinale, all of them, who are then curating films of the global south, who then become the experts. But the filmmakers, POC filmmakers who are here in Germany, once they're here, then not get funded. So I was rejected at Perspektive Deutsches Kino because they said this is not a German film, and I'm not German. And then I'm, okay, so I'm not German. So it's a very strange relationship with like nation as well, and how this plays in all this dynamic, you know? And so we need to have a different understanding as well of that.
We can take one more, and then there will be reception, and we can continue to talk. So don't go away, please.
Hi, my name is Thais Guisassola. I'm from Brazil, and I have been working in Berlin both with Simone Haikirima Paetau and Liz Rosenfeld in films. I think we tackled a lot of very important issues, you know, regarding to intersectionality, politics, the distribution and the commercialization of films, and I think that all of this reminds me of like what makes a good or a bad film? How do we judge what is good and what is a bad film? Because also we construct our ideologies, we construct our narratives, we construct ways of understanding what means to tell a story. And this is a very specific way, because we have been seeing the same ways of creating narratives, of commercializing them, of consuming them. And I think, especially for those people who are on the judging side, I think it's also very interesting to think about what do we consider a good film and why? And what is the history that up to now made this a good or a better film than this? And I think that really tackles into intersectionality, because with the different oppressions that you're crossed, can you really speak this narrative? Do you need to just assimilate into certain commercial narratives in order to be able to even make yourself a filmmaker or be recognized as one? And I think that it's a very it's kind of an invitation for us to think about, you know, how many narratives and forms of thinking about telling stories are completely invisibilized throughout history, and how can we actually open these spaces, taking into consideration that the part of the filmmaking industry which is so strong, which is related to money, budget, and who is going to consume it, or who is going to fund the festival? How can we create strategies to understand that we also need to understand what is the difference between a good and bad film? Perhaps it's not the one we think it is. What is the difference between this type of telling a story and another type of telling a story? I think that we can perhaps create strategies for thinking that, so as to be able to, tackle these issues of like capitalism and the relationship to art. Are we free when we're so bound to capitalism?
Yeah, just brief. I don't think there's any quick answer to that. I think the whole point is you keep saying that. I think the point is you have a collective of like-minded people that keep moving it forward. The democratization of forms of exhibition, whether it's online or non-traditional spaces, helps. Audience gathering, which is the toughest, is one of the keys, and I think there's a solution in the digital age that is yet to be found of how to access your audience that wants your story. I believe every story deserves to be told. Every story deserves to be told. The key that we still need to find is how do we learn to access those audiences? I don't have a solution. Our solution is our programmers look so diverse, age, whatnot, whatever. There is no one single authoritative voice. Well, Lucy is. But it goes through a lot of lenses before it gets to her. So we're trying.
One short remark. Okay, directly to Emily?
Yeah, in a way, I suppose.
One second, please.
Just in terms of audience, I suppose that's my kind of core mission as making the films I want to make, and the number of times I've been told there's not an audience for that. That's my biggest barrier. And so then it does come down to audience, and I think there's also an element of subverting audience expectations. I mean, even with I'm Not a Witch, the number of people who said to me, God, I thought it was going to be it's actually really funny. Oh, I actually really enjoyed it. And they thought it was going to be a worthy film about Zambia, and it's like, yes, exactly. I want to make entertaining films as well. It doesn't. And so it's, I think it's getting, well, it can be, but not too heavy, Okay, it's taste. Taste is also a thing. But it is tough, and it's tough getting them in front of people and then having, and getting the people programming them to believe that there can be an audience and to take those risks. And it's a constant battle, and I don't know what the answer is.
Okay, there's one last statement. Please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Vinita Bailey. I'm an actor, German actor from Thuringia. So it's really great to have this diversity talk finally in this place. But my remark is that I had to go all the way to Canada, to Montreal, to actually be part of an artist mentorship program that supports young emerging artists of color. And I just wanted to share this, even though the time is up, with all of you, that young emerging artists, directors, I talk about costume designers, videographers, all kinds of branches are supported there by the government to get a mentor, a successful person who leads us and shows us how to do things, because there, I didn't find access. And that is a great role model, and I hope there are decision makers in the room. I'm happy to share about this experience. It's an amazing experience. I'm making big steps over there. I would love to do it in my own language without an accent. But right now I'm using this opportunity, and I hope that I come back and things have changed, and I'm able to play a German on screen one day.
And with this statement and with this hope, I would like to thank all of you. Thanks to the audience for your patience, for being here. Thanks, Simone. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Karola. Thanks, Sheri. Thanks, Christopher. Thanks to all of you and Silke and Betty who organized it, for being here. The journey is not over. We still have a lot of work to do, but as we could see, some things have changed already, and now we can stay together, right? There's a reception, so please feel invited to stay, to talk with us, to eat and drink something. Okay, thank you very much.
I want to thank you, the Film Festival, to the Frauen Film Festival, for allowing us to be here, really. It's the step. Right, really, thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much to the Film Festival, yeah.